Google Developer Student Clubs train hundreds of thousands of university student developers globally while having fun getting to know other students at their school. Google selects students with strong leadership skills from across the globe once a year to start a club on their campus. These leads believe knowledge is power and that technology can do extraordinary things for the world. They take on the responsibility to help students learn and empower each other to solve real problems around them. Students can participate in the annual Solution Challenge by Google developers to solve for one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Join us in building a global community for students in technology.
Hello, welcome everyone to our last and final session for Android Study Jams. This series has been a remarkable thing of its own, and I'm so delighted to be hosting it as part of the Florida Atlantic University GDSC. I'm Ahmad. I am the president and lead of that chapter here, and I'm very eager to hosting it here with you guys today. And I just want to say thank you guys so much for coming. And for those that came all 4 events, we have a special prize for you, but more so of that later. And without further ado, we'll go on to the next slide. And so I want to talk about the schedule today. This one is a really great one. You don't want to miss out on this. We had our pre-session, and it was a great Scribbler match, I got to admit. And for our overview, I just want to go over a quick few details as well as a few minor ones. And then from there, we'll go ahead and hit it off with our session. So first thing is that we'll go ahead and talk about those that participate in all 4 events. I just wanted to say that we have something for you guys. We have not left you out, and we appreciate everyone that has attended, not just for all 4 events, but for everyone, because we appreciate it, from building the badges or earning your badges and building your own app. It's been a wonderful journey so far, and we want to see what you guys have. So after this event, we'll have is a opening submission period where you guys can submit your apps and show us what you did with it, what you guys learned, and from there, the week after that, we'll look into them, see them, and give you guys even potential shout outs as well as to review them, and then go ahead and send you guys some prizes. And who doesn't like prizes, right? Especially Google merch. So that is something that for everyone that has participated and is eager to continue with this, I think this is a great way to end it off with a great banger. So keep note of that, and more information is to come. All right, so without further ado, it is my own pleasure to have with us here not 1, but 2 guest speakers, Sierra and Nav. Both are Android Google developer experts, and I'm more than excited to have them here to go with us over how to add a button to an app. And we'll go ahead and start us off. Sierra, take it away.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here. I know everyone here already knows me, probably, from the last few sections. I don't know if we want to also bring Nav up so he could take a quick minute to introduce himself today before we get started with our session.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks to the organizers. My name is Nav Singh. I am from Montreal. I'm Google developer expert for Android and working as a mobile software engineer at Manulife and writing technical articles related to Android and Kotlin, and also organizer at GDG Montreal. So that's pretty much about myself. Thanks for your time. And let's start with today's session. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much. Can we switch over to sharing my screen and then we can dive in? Perfect. The infinite screen, love that. All right, let's jump in. So thank you all so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So today we're going to learn about user interaction. So we're going to program our app to handle how the user interacts with things on the screen. So we've already learned about layouts and how to build an app. And so today we're going to make our app do something. And so today we're doing pathway 4. And with that, let's go ahead and get started the same way that we always do. We're going to go to g.co/android/basics, and I'm going to head over there as well. g.co/android/basics. You can tell I go there a lot. It quickly pops up for me. Hopefully the same for you if you've been following along with us. We're going to dive into Unit 1, the unit we've been working through, and then today we will be doing add a button to an apps and explore there. I love that really simple title because we're actually going to learn about a lot of different things during this particular code lab or these sets of code labs. It's so much more than just adding a button to the app. So let's get started with our first code lab for today, which is classes and object instances in Kotlin. So I'm going to go ahead and take this code lab. For this particular code lab, we will be doing the Kotlin playground again. So I recommend that you all open those side by side for this particular part of the code lab. So I am going to work on setting mine up that way so we can see both our code lab and our Kotlin playground throughout the presentation. And with that, there we go. So what we're going to do for this particular code lab is in this pathway is going to be building a dice roller Android app. When the user rolls the dice, a random result will be generated, and that result takes into account the number of sides of a dice. So for example, this is kind of what your app is going to look like at the end. And so to help us focus on these new programming concepts for this app, we're going to work inside the Kotlin playground to learn about objects in Kotlin. So we already did our first intro to Kotlin a while ago where we learned about functions and these sorts of things that we've already used in our pathway. And so now we're going to continue to build on that knowledge. So what we're going to learn about is how to programmatically generate random numbers to simulate dice rolls, how to structure our code by creating a dice class with a variable and a method, and how to create an object instance of a class, modify its variables, and call its methods. So let's go ahead and jump in. So I'm sure you have played any kind of game with the dice before, and so there's often that element of randomness to it. In my personal opinion, I like games that are mostly random because I get a little too competitive sometimes when there's strategy involved. And so we're going to do some random number generations to simulate rolling a dice. And so instead of rolling an actual dice, we're going to write a program that will simulate that for us. Each time we roll the dice, the outcome can be any number within a range of possible values. And we don't have to build our own random number generator for such a program because many programming languages, including Kotlin, have a built-in way to do that for us. So we're going to go ahead and set up our starter code. So if you haven't already, again, I recommend doing these windows side by side. You'll just want to open up the Kotlin playground, and we're going to immediately delete the code inside our main function. And so the first thing that we're going to learn about is using that random function. So we know that for most dice, it's going to be 6-sided, sides 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so we previously learned about integers for integer numbers, or int for integer numbers, and string for text. Today, we're going to be using a new type called int range, which is another data type, and it represents a range of integer numbers from one starting point to an end point. And that's a really good way for us to represent every possible value that a dice can roll. So inside our main function, we are now going to create a new variable as val, so something we can't change from what we learned about earlier. And that's going to be called dice range. And we're going to set that equal to 1 dot dot 6. And so we can tell that 1 dot dot 6 is a Kotlin range because it has a start number, in our case 1, 2 dots, followed by an ending number, in our case 6, with no spaces in between. And so we could do any kind of range using this kind of notation. One thing that we had to do last time, which we don't have to do this time, is that we don't have a type explicitly to set inside our code. So we didn't do dice colon, the dice range colon the type that we need. Instead, we can immediately set it to 1.6. And that's because Kotlin can infer those types for us. So by setting it equal to 1.6, it already knows that that's going to be an int range. And so in that green tip, it says these two different ways of defining a dice range are exactly the same. And so most people can prefer it this way because it's just a little bit easier to read and less code to write. So similar to calling print line, similar to how print line tells the system to print a given text, you can use a function called random to generate and return a random number for your given range. Our range, again, is 1 through 6. And so as before, we can store that in a variable. And so we're going to create a new variable called a random number. And again, it's going to be a val. I'm going to call that random number. And we're going to set that equal to dice range, what we just defined, range dot random. And so notice that you were calling random on dice range using a period or a dot between the variable and the function call. And so we can read this as generating a random number from dice range. And the result is then stored in our new variable random number. And so now we're going to go ahead and see that printed out. So we're going to add another line and do print line. Go ahead and do random number. Random number. And so we learned how to add our variables into strings during that first session as well. And so our finished code matches what's in our code lab. And so we can go ahead and run that using that green play button. And so mine comes out, my first random number is 5. Yours is probably maybe something different as well. And so our code is working. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next section of our code lab, which is where we're going to learn about creating a dice class. When we roll a dice, they're real objects in your hands. And that's something I really like about object-oriented languages. I think it's really easy to think about the world around us like dice as objects, because that's how I interact with objects in my real world. And so that's a really easy way for me to think about programming. All dice are going to work essentially the same. They have the same properties, such as the number of sides, and they have the same behavior, such as that they can all be rolled. And so in Kotlin, we can create a programmatic blueprint of a dice that says a dice has sides and can roll a random number. This blueprint is called a class. And from that class, you can then create actual dice objects. And those objects are called object instances. And so, for example, we can create a 12-sided dice, or we can create a 4-sided dice. The analogy that Google is going to give to us is that a class is similar to an architect's blueprint plans. How an architect's blueprint plans are not a house. They are instructions on how to build that house. The house is the actual thing or the object instance created according to the blueprint. So in our case, a class definition is going to be that blueprint, and our object instances are going to be the house. And so organizing everything about the dice into a class is called encapsulation. And encapsulation is just a fancy word meaning that you enclose all the functionality inside that class. So it's all in one single place. So let's go ahead and define our dice class. So we're going to go ahead and clear out the main function. And then below our main function, we're going to do an enter, and then we're going to do class, dice, and again, some curly braces. And so similar to how we learned about fun, for functions, class is also a special keyword that says you're going to create a class. And you can always choose the name for your class, and is often going to describe the type of object. So some of the other examples are car, parking meter, customer record. And so we really want that class name to represent what we should expect from that class. And so inside our dice class, we're now going to add a var, so something that can be changed, but size, and set that equal to 6. And that's it. So now we already have our very simple class representing a dice. And so now we can actually create an instance of this dice class. And every time we create it, we can create multiple instances, my first dice, my second dice, my third dice, and all of those will be built according to this dice class that serves as the blueprint of our object. So to create an object instance back in our main function, we can do add val my first dice equals dice. So what we should notice is that my first dice object is the thing that's built from that blueprint, and we can access its properties. So what we can do next is do print line. Keep spelling out line. My first dice size. And so you're going to use that dot size notation, similar to how we talked about that dot notation for random that we talked about earlier. We did dice range dot random, and now we're doing my first dice dot side. And so that's always kind of a pattern you can see is this object dot some kind of action on it. In this case, we're doing get sides. And so we can go ahead and run this again. And this time we should all be getting the same number out, which is a 6. So now we're going to add that functionality that we talked about. All dice have similar functionality. They can all roll. So inside our dice class, we're now going to add a function. Use our function keyword, fun, and a function called roll. And again, curly braces, just like we learned how to make a function before. And so inside that, we're going to do something really similar to how we kind of started, and we're going to create our val random number equals. And this time, instead of defining our range separately, we're just going to do 1.6 and then random directly onto that. And then we can print that out. Awesome. And so to actually roll that dice, we need to now call this function. So we need to add up in our main function, we create our dice, we print the sides, and now we're also going to roll that dice. So we'll do my first dice dot roll. And so we can again run our code, and we should get out 6 for our sides and then a random number between 1 and 6. In my case, I got out 2 6s. And so congratulations, you have now defined a dice class with sides variable and a roll function. And in the main function, we called both of these. So let's go ahead and move on to the next section. So right now we're just printing out that random number inside the roll function. And instead we might want to print that out so that we can do something else with it. And so in the main, we're going to modify the line that says my first dice dot roll, and we're now going to create a val dice roll equals my first dice dot roll. And so right now this doesn't do anything because roll doesn't return anything. And so what we're going to do now is update that roll function to return the value. And so we learned about functions already, and so we know how to make a function return a value. So we're going to update our method signature to now have this int in the method signature that says that this function is going to return an int. And so if we run this code now, it's going to yell at us and say that a return expression is required in our function with a block body. And so we changed this function to now return an int, but our code isn't actually returning an integer. And so now we have to update that as well. And so instead of doing this print line random number, we are going to do return random number. And so just following along with the code lab, we're going to get rid of this first print line. We don't need to see the sides anymore. And we're going to combine it.
All right. Real quick question we have from Denny, who says, so the purpose of val my first dice is to link our main function to the class we made?
It's to capture the value of our object instance of dice. So we want to know what value we roll, and then we want to use it in this next step. So right now we're not doing anything with that dice roll value. But in this next step, we're going to be able to print that out. And so we need to call this and with this return value and save it off so that we can use it later on in this main function.
Okay.
Great question. So let's go ahead and now use that dice roll. So a great lead-in from that question is we want this value so that we can use it in the next lines below it. And so we're now going to add a new print line that combines both our dice sides and our dice roll. And so we're going to do now we're going to do our dice size. So we'll do my first dice dot sides. And so we can do this function called directly in this string by wrapping it in those curly braces. And so this was actually a question that came up in that first code lab that we did together is when do we need these curly braces? And the answer is when you're using objects and you might want to make that do things inside that string. And so this is that example of what Anaki talked about during that first code lab. And then we'll do sided dice rolled. And now we're going to use that value of dice roll. So the value that we saved off, and we called that function, we're going to use here, and we'll add an exclamation point because we're excited. And so we can again roll our dice, print it out. And so our 6-sided dice rolled a 5. And your 5 might vary as well. And so we now have ended this particular section. So let's move on to the next. We are now going to change the number of sides on our dice. And so the first thing that we have to do is right now inside our dice class, this range of our numbers is hard-coded to 6. And so instead of using that 6, using 6 here and just hard-coding it to this number, so that when we update the sides, the range also updates, we're going to change this out to sides. And so now it's going to go 1 to however many sides that we have. Our random number can be anywhere in those. And so up in our main function, we are now going to update the number of sides. And so we can do my first dice dot sides equals 20. And then we also want to grab this print line. We can put it here. And instead of doing our dice roll, so now we're going to make that function call directly in here as well. So we'll do my first dice dot roll. So we can also call the roll function directly in the string as well. And so we will again run that code. And so now my 6-sided dice rolled a 1 and my 20-sided dice rolled a 15. And so I know that my code is working because I wouldn't have been able to get a 15 if that sides was still set to 6. And so let's move on to the next section again. So now we're going to be able to customize our dice. And so the idea of a class is to represent a thing, something often in the physical world, like a dice. And so in this case, a dice class does represent a physical dice. Sorry, that's a mouthful. In the real world, our dice can't change the number of sides. So right now we have this one instance of our dice class, and then we just change it randomly to 20. And that's not realistic for how a real dice would work. If I have a 6-sided dice, that's how it's going to be forever. And I have to get a new dice to have a 20-sided dice. And so we're going to now modify the dice class to accept an integer value called num sides. And the code inside does not quite change it. So we're going to add parentheses here and do val num sides. That's going to be an int. Now inside the dice class, we're going to delete this var size. So we'll go ahead and delete that. We'll leave our roll function. But we will update it now from sides to num size. And so now our dice class is now updated. And so in our main class, we now have to make some updates as well. So now my first dice needs to have an integer passed in. So I'm going to go ahead and keep this one 6-sided. So this will now be dice with 6 in the parentheses. And then we also no longer have this sides variable. We only have num sides. And so we'll also want to update my first dice to sides, num sides inside our print line. And for now, we will get rid of these 2 lines. Now we're going to create another dice. So this is what we meant when we said if we think about physical objects, we would need 2 different dice. So we will now create val my second dice equals dice. And this time we'll do 20. So we'll pass in 20 for this one. And so we can again snag this line and do something really similar. We'll update it to my second dice, num sides, and my second dice got roll. And so we're up to date with our code, and we can again go ahead and run that code. And so our 6-sided dice had a value of 2, and our 20-sided dice, my 20-sided dice, had rolled a value of 19. And so we can move on to the last coding section of this lab, which is going to be adopting good coding practices. And so this is just some recommendations for how to update your code to be a little bit more readable. So inside our roll function, right now we separately have this random number, and then we return that random number. Instead of doing that, we can actually get rid of our return here and just return it directly on this first line. So we no longer have to create this extra variable, and we can just return directly that 1 to number sides dot random. And so we can do this a similar thing up here is update our first print line to also be my first dice dot roll, just like we're doing with the second dice already. And we can go ahead and get rid of this dice roll variable. So all we have to do is create our object and then print out our statement. When we do these sorts of things, what we're doing here has made our code a little bit shorter, more efficient, and easier to read and understand. That's a process called refactoring. It's like writing a document where you write the first draft, and then you go back and have all the information, you edit and refine. Something I say a lot is make it work, then make it better. So that making it better part is the refactoring stage. And so now, again, we're up to date with our code lab. We can run it one last time to make sure everything is still working, and it is. And we can go ahead and move on. So they share their solution code, a summary of everything that we've learned so far, learn more that we see every time, and also a little bit of practice on your own that I recommend you go back and do. And so with that, I think we're going into our first break.
Yep. So thank you so much, Sierra. For everyone here, thank you guys so much for sticking through. Stretch out your legs, take a walk, or within the 5 minutes you can get, and drink something, drink some water. And as displayed there, that is last week's prize. So we'll have a raffle in the meantime, and we'll announce the winner at the end of it. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be right back. Thank you. Alrighty, thank you guys so much for coming back here. We're back from our break, and we've got our winner. So congratulations to Saurabh. I know I butchered that. I apologize. From the University of Florida. So huge congrats to you. It's Saurabh. So huge congratulations. You win a backpack. And I hope you're excited as I am, because yay, that's awesome. And I hope you guys are ready and feeling refreshed to come back in for our second collab. And Sierra, I'll leave it back to you.
Ooh, it got really dark in my room.
Just a little.
Let me turn on this light. Hang on. Had good sun before.
Is it already sunset on your guys' side?
It's sun setting now. It's just been a very cloudy day. All right. Awesome. My screen's back up. Thanks, everyone. Hope you had a great break. Those backpacks are awesome. I want a backpack. Okay, let's jump back in. So we are now doing the Create an Interactive Dice Roller app. So for this one, we are going to have Android Studio open. Just like all of the other ones, I always recommend that's the main thing on your screen, and you just listen to me in the background. So let's go ahead and jump in. We'll open up Android Studio, and then we'll create a new project like we always do. New project. And we'll pick the empty activity. And let's see what we're going to name it. Dice Roller. Nice, nice. And they recommend going back to 19. So we will listen to them today. Nice. We'll finish. Oh, no. I updated this today. Okay. I don't want to put you on the spot now, but do you want to do this section and I'll take the next one? I did not expect that to happen because I just upgraded and I didn't expect to have to download these again. I don't want to put us behind. Well, while we're doing that, let's start talking about the next one. While this waits, it's going pretty quickly now. Okay, great. So you have set it up. The next section, section 3, is going to be a lot of really similar things to what we did last time. So we're going to go really quickly through this next section because we learned all about layouts last time. And so we're going to, again, open up our layout file. So that will be our main activity layout file in the res folder. And then we're going to go ahead and add a button. We're going to constrain some sides just like we did last time to position that. And yours will probably also just need a little bit of time to update, index, pull everything in from our Gradle. I'll close all those. So if you want to go ahead and get started, we learned about layouts last time. So you can look in that palette in our layout editor. And again, if yours does not by default show you the layout editor, up in that upper right-hand side, there's code, split, and design. So we're going to use that last view to use the layout editor. So over in the left corner, there will be that palette where we can find lots of common views that we can use. We learned about constraint layout yesterday and how these all of these views are going to go inside that view group. And so we're going to drag a button from that view, from that palette, into our layout and try to put it kind of below our text view. And then we're going to start constraining those sides. And so the top of the button is going to be constrained to the bottom of the hello world that is going to be there by default. And to do that, we learned last time that we can just kind of drag those little circles to the bottom of that text view. And then we can also constrain the sides to the start of our parent and the end of the button to the end of the parent as well. And we also learned about how to use the attributes to open up that window of all the constraints as well, to set up things like margins and padding and all of the different features of our button as well. Sometimes setting up these projects is the worst. I'm going to get us behind. So hopefully you are able to start trying to set that part up. So once we finish pulling all those buttons, we're going to update the text just like we did last time using those attributes, and update it to role. And then following the best practices that we learned last time, we're going to extract that text that we're hard coding into that text field and pull it into our strings file, because we know that that is the best way to keep our strings for localization and these sorts of things and reusability. And then from there, we are also going to style our text as well. Come on, you're so close. And so we'll update our text to 36. And then we'll also learn about using the tools text. And so the tools text are a really cool thing that we can use as developers for things that we're not ready to hard code yet, or put it directly into the app. So in our case, we're building this app that's going to update the value that's shown on the screen. And so when that happens, we want to see it in our preview so we can know what it looks like, but we're not ready to define that value explicitly. And so we can use the text with a little wrench next to it, and that's just for us. It's just going to show up in our preview. And if you go ahead and run your app, you wouldn't see a value in that text field. So purely for development purposes. And so that is going to actually end up wrapping up part 3 of this. And so the next section will be learning about activities. And so what we need to know, we can learn about an activity, is that the activity is the whole screen of our UI, in which our app is going to draw its UI. And so we talked about how every Kotlin function is going to have, every Kotlin program is going to have this main function. And in the case of an Android application, the main activity is often what you can kind of think of as that main function that spins up your whole application. And so in this, if we think back to our birthday card app, there was one activity, and that displayed our birthday message and image. And then this roll dice app, our activity is going to display the text view and the button we just built. Hopefully you all are actually building it while I painfully sit through this. And so every Android app can have will have at least one activity, but can have multiple activities as well. And so there might be one activity that does different things in your application. So if you're looking at part 4 of your code lab, they show different things that could be an activity. So they have a gallery activity, they have a viewer activity, and they have an editor activity. I cannot believe how long is this taking. And so we can actually look at our main activity. So if you're in your code, you can open up that main activity. And so what you see here is that we have this main activity, and it's extending the app compact activity. And we have this onCreate function that's going to get called as soon as our app opens. And right now, all it's going to do is call the function of this super classes function, and then it's going to set the content based on our layout. And so we don't need to understand everything that's happening, but we have a general idea for what it's going to be doing. On your own computer, you can also update some settings by updating the auto imports. So import pulls in what we need to do our different code. And so we can actually look at that in our code lab, is in section 4. If you want to set up auto imports, you're able to do that by going to your file, project settings, preferences for new projects, and expand other setting auto import. And in the Java and Kotlin section, you can make sure to check add unambiguous imports on the fly and optimize imports on the fly for the current projects are checked. Note that there are 2 checkboxes in each section, and you can save those changes and then close the settings by pressing OK. I'm so sorry that this is taking so long. I'm in pain sitting in front of you while this is happening. And so what those 2 settings do is the unambiguous import settings tells Android Studio to automatically add import statements as long as they can determine which one to use. And the optimize imports tells Android Studio to remove any imports that aren't being used by your code. So let's just check in. Is everyone got their Android project up and working? And have you been able to add your buttons to your layout?
All right. How are you feeling? Like, do we want to switch it over here, or do you feel like you're more confident in continuing this this part of the section?
I would love to hand it over if that's possible.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, we can go ahead and switch it over. But first and foremost, you've done a remarkable job, honestly, navigating through it, seeing through the tools. Like, I was able to follow through with that, and thank you so much for that. We'll have here with us Nav come up here shortly and take over.
Yeah, sure. So let me share my screen. Okay, screen 2.
Awesome.
So you're able to see my screen, right?
Yes.
Perfect. So I think Sarah covers the step 4th, which is introduction to activities. And if you guys already have like, I will go from the step 5, which is like making the button interactive. So this is the dice roller app, and you already see the logic that Sarah completed in the last code lab, like creating a dice class and creating objects, and like you have a basic idea how to do that kind of stuff. And in this code lab, we will create an Android application, which is like having a button component, and then when you click on that, you do all the things that you have done in the previous code lab with the playground. You will have that logic in your application and use that with your Android application. So I guess set up your app. Okay, so I guess you guys already created this step. Let me go through quickly just to make sure. So you have this button and text view in your application, right? And activities we done. So the step we are now currently moving from this one, which is step 5th, making the button interactive. So, just a sec. I hope the text is enough in the size so you can able to see the see the what is written in the code in the IDE. Let me know if there is an issue. So this is the layout. Let me open it quickly. I have opened the emulator in my Android Studio. So this is your layout file, which has two components, text view and okay. Let So these are the two components that you added previously in your layout file, which is text view and then the button. Now in this step, we will make this button interactive. By that I mean like when there is any kind of action, user like click on this button if you want to do something, like if you want to show some messages or do some process and then show some kind of output to the user. We will see how we can do that. So what we do is if we go through like go via code lab, it says like whenever you perform a click on this button, we will show the toast which says dice rolled, and the toast will be displayed to the screen. So this is the code that you can grab from here, or I can quickly show you in the activity. So for the moment, because this is the solution code, so don't go with this, just comment. I will comment this code for the moment. I will go by code lab. So you can actually type the short like just a toast and it will create a toast for you. And then it really needs a context. First parameter is the context, which will be activity in this case, which is main activity here. And then here you will write dice rolled. And there is a two types of the length that you can define in your case of the toast, which is length short or length long. And then you can directly call a show method on that. Or if you see in the code lab, there is a way that you can store the created toast into a variable here, which says val toast, and then call the show on that. But it's a little bit conciser, like you just directly call the show on the toast itself rather than creating a variable of type toast. So let's run this application and see how this toast actually look like. So you see dice rolled. That's the functionality of the toast. And when you tap on the roll, it shows the dice rolled toast again and again whenever you tap on that button. So this is how you can perform like type um, set click listener for your views. Okay. So the next step is rather than doing the like showing the toast to the end user is like updating the text view that we have in our application. If you see in the layout, you added the text view that like whenever user tap on the button, then we need to show the text. So let's see what we need to do. So we have the I know. Okay. So they just want to end this step. They just want to hard coded the text for a text view. So let's do that quickly. So if you go to your layout here, you have the ID for this text view is this one is text view. So we will just grab that. And here we will create a text view. And with the help of the find view by ID, you can access the elements that you have added into your layouts, and you will provide the ID for that view. So whenever user press like tap on the button, we just want to set a hard coded text for this one. So I will set it to 6, and we will just comment the code for toast now. So that's the step 5th completion. So whenever user taps on the roll button, we find the view every time, which is not a good solution. Like every time doing this thing, we can just move this line bit up, like on the create where we find actually the button. So you can take that line out of the click listener, and every time you just update the text rather than again going to find the view and then setting the value for that. So this was the step 5. I hope you guys completed. If you have any questions, feel free to add in the chat. So the next step is adding the dice roll logic for that you have done in the previous code lab for with the playground. We will take that logic and see how we can implement or add into our application. And whenever you tap on the button and doing some kind of processing the logic of rolling the dice and showing the output to the user. So you need to if you already have the code from the Kotlin playground, you can just grab that code or just copy the code from this code lab, which is the dice class, and it has a num sides property and then one function which is called roll, and every time you roll it, it will give you the random number between the from 1 to the sides that you have defined when you created an object for from type dice. So this is the this thing is like whenever there is kind of these are basically the lint warnings that whenever you write code in Android Studio, it performs some checks on your code, and if it found some issues or improvements that you can do, just you can follow those guidelines or the warnings and improve your code base as you develop your application or write your code. It's not just in the Kotlin code, but also even if you are in your layout files, you will see these kind of behavior, and this is what Android lint is doing in the back for you, like providing the best experience to the developers to improve these kind of things. But the thing is here is if we make it private, then we cannot access this property outside the when you create object like when you create this object of dice in any other class, it will only be accessible within the dice. So that's why I think later on we need to access the num sides, so we cannot create a private. That's why we don't want it to be private, so you just keep it a public, which is by default. So if you go to the class, this is what exactly the same code, which is dice and num sides. And I guess as per the code lab, we don't need to access this property outside the scope of dice, so we mark it as a private, and then that function. The next thing is creating a method which is called roll dice in the main activity class, which is your activity in your application. And rather than updating the text in the on the button click listener, you will call that method. So roll dice, you will call the roll dice method, and let me comment this for now to actually show you quickly how that will look like. So you see it's it's in a red because we didn't have defined this function in our activity or in our class. So when you just hit option enter on Mac, it will give you a couple of options. The first one is create function. So let's create that, and it will create you and added the to do that you need to implement this method. So this is what you have in the step 4, like create a function from the more actions, and this is done. So in the roll dice function, what we want to do is like we want to create a dice object with the providing number of sides. We can hard code it at this point, or maybe like later on it can be improved. But creating a dice and then call the dice roll method, and based on that, whatever in output we get, we just set that as a text of a text view rather than setting it a hard coded value of 6. So this is the final body of our function, which is roll dice. Like there are 4 lines. Basically, first create an object of dice, passing the num side 6, then calling the roll method on that, and then setting the text of our text view based on the output of that dice roll. So let's go to quickly here. I will just grab the code from here to this method. Just replace this. Okay, so I created we have a dice now, we roll it, and we have this. So I as I move it to here, so we don't actually need this one. And quickly I will name it result text view. Yeah, for because that's in the main function, so we need to create a activity based properties if we want to access the same property in multiple functions. But so in this case we just create a dice, then call the roll method and saving that value into a dice roll, and then getting the finding the view from our layout file and then setting the text. Here we call toString method because text, it takes a param, like its value is supposed to be string. You cannot set a integer as a value for your text views text property. And if you see here, if it will like, if you go to the text view.java file, you will see the method set text and it takes char sequence of. So that's why we need to call the toString rather than just passing the dice roll value, which is type of integer. If you see in the this function, it returns the int number rather than a string. You can do here also like toString here rather than doing here, but again this is like we are just following the code lab. So that's it. And I added the roll dice call, so let's run it quickly to see how it actually works now. So our code is running. So now you see whenever you type on button, it will create an object of dice and then generate a random number every time you tap on the roll button. So that's, I guess, is the step number 5. And the next step is the 7th, which is adopting the good coding practices. You can follow the link given in the Discord lab, which is Kotlin style guide for Android developers. And here, if you are beginner of to the Kotlin, then I guess you might follow the same things, like you familiar with Java writing a lot of code, but with Kotlin you can concise a lot of code base. So that's what they here explaining here. So roll dice method, we are calling on set on click listener and just like doing this, like if you go to your Android Studio and select all the file, and it will format your all the file if there is any formatting issues with your code base. So just select a full code, and it's a command optional in Android in Mac, and it will format the entire file for you. And that's the next thing is commenting, like adding comments to your code. This is basically a good practice to actually providing the context, because you never in real world scenario when you are in your job, you might know where if you quit or if there is some any new developer join your team, rather than asking every single thing to other developers, if you provided a good documentation for your classes, for your methods, it will be very easy for that later on, for the understanding for your code, like what it actually doing, and if there is any things that any sort of complexity that you want to clearly mention in your comments, you can provide. But most of the time we write a functions or our code in a way that we need less comments in our code base. But it's not a bad if there are situations, then we need to make sure that we add enough documentation for our code base. So here, if you see the comments, for example, this one, if you are a very beginner kind of developer, you might need to add these comments, like creating a new dice object with the 6. If you don't know, like what's the what we mean by object, then we can add these lines. But if you are having a very clarity, like a good concept, so knowledge of from oops, then you know that like what is object and how we create it, then you can omit these kind of comments. But this is helpful if there is someone who is not familiar with Android but they know the programming world. But here is like, you can say like this is a text view and we are getting the value from dice roll and setting that to as a text for a text view. So these are just the basics. I think they just cover the highlight the main, like a 2 or 3 things. But you can concise, even like when you are familiar with the Kotlin, you can use the functions, like there are scope functions, apply, let, and they are like they make your code base very concise, and you can follow and implement whatever you want and within a quite less code, rather than like if you are familiar with Java, where we need to like write a lot of code. So this was basically about adopting the good coding practices. So the final solution code is available here. You can grab from either from like downloading the zip file or just opening the GitHub via this. When you go to the repository here, this is basically that. You click on code. There are a couple of options. Whichever you are comfortable with, you can download and play with it if you are not able to complete this code lab. And so what we have done in this section, basically we added the button and text into a layout file. So the next one is how we can use the toast. Then we set up the click listener for the button and showing the toast on that whenever user tap on that button. And after that we removed the toast functionality and added the functionality to set the hard coded value for the text view. Like every time when we set the 6, whenever user tap on button, click on the button. And the last one is like when after that we added the logic for the dice. So we create the dice and we roll it, and whatever output we get from that method, we set it on our text with text property. And the last one is like we just go through some of the good coding practices, like adding comments and making your code base more concise using the features provided by the Kotlin. So I hope you guys follow all these steps. And if you want to learn more about these concepts, like whatever we have covered here, like for what is the button and what are the different other options or properties this class is have, or toast or text view, or the last one is Kotlin style guide. This is really important. You can go through these links. These are all the links are available in this code lab, and you can go through whenever you get time. And again, the last, as I said in the previous code lab, just practice, and practice makes you more comfortable or perfect whatever you try to achieve. By like if you want to be in Android development or even in any other development, like learning Kotlin or any other language, just practice. So that's all in this code lab. Thanks for attending this one.
Alrighty. Thank you so much, Nav. I do appreciate it. You did an awesome job navigating through. So yeah. Did we want to halt it here for now, or did we want to continue with the next code lab? Up to you guys in preference of in respected time. I know we're a bit out of time, but it's totally in respect to what would you like as well.
So the next one is very quick. Like we can quickly complete it in 10-15 minutes possibly.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure about the fourth one. Maybe you can check in with Sarah if she wants to do the fourth one. But I can quickly complete the next one. It's about just the Kotlin code. It's not related to an app. So
absolutely, yeah, I think we can go there.
Okay.
So
okay, so I'm still sharing my screen, and the next one is very this one is adding conditional behavior in Kotlin. So this will be like very quickly I will go through this one, and if we get a little time we can do the fourth one, or maybe you can just follow along with this code lab by your own. And if you get any issues, you can feel free to ping us on any channels like LinkedIn or Twitter, wherever you feel. So let's do the third one. So conditional behavior. So if you familiar with the conditional behavior, like in general terms, it's basically like there is some kind of conditions, and based on that we have certain behavior that we expected to be occurred. Like if, for example, in terms of programming, when it comes to the programming, like for example, we have a number, let's say we have a dice class, right? So rather than every time updating the text value, we can put certain kind of conditions. Like for example, if the after rolling that, if we get a number between 1 to 4 or 3 to 5, then we will only update the number. And if the other, in other cases, we will do nothing, or we will just show some kind of toast message to the user, like this number is not valid, or we are like, you need to roll it again to get the valid number. So there are a couple of other examples that you can think about in this case, but in this code lab they basically provide us the introduction about the Kotlin, how we can achieve this behavior using the conditional operators or statements like if else, when statement, and what are the boolean, what is like true or false based on the like the conditions, and how to implement these different statements or expressions in our Kotlin language. So as I mentioned, you will learn about if else statements. Then there are some conditional operators like less than, greater than, and equality check. And there is a when statement in Kotlin. This is basically, I can say, a replacement of switch that we have in Java. And then the last one is Boolean data types, which is true or false. And what you will build is the Kotlin based dice game, and we will see how we can use these statements, or when statement, or if else, or Boolean data types in our application. So I will not go through the again. This is basically the definitions of how if else works. So I will directly jump into the coding section, and we will see how we can add the conditional behavior in our code labs. So let me open this. Yeah. So here we are. So here we are creating a variable named called num, which is val, which is like not going to be changed at any point in our code. And then there is a if statement we use, like we are using the greater than operator here. It's a conditional operator which is checking the equality. So here we are saying like if the num is greater than 4, and then we print the statement which is variable is greater than 4. So we just go here, let's say well num equals to 3, and we will add if statement. So as our number is not greater than 4, because it's 3, the if will skip the its body. So if this is the structure of the if, like if statement, then the brackets, then the condition, and this condition is need to be satisfied if you want to execute anything within the body of the if. That this is called the body. It's same like a function, like its function, and then function has its own body. Then same is like for if else, if statement, it has its own body, and it will only execute this if this condition met at any point. So if we replace it with the equals to 3, that means the value of the number is, if it's equals to 3, like for example this, then it will execute the function, and it will execute the body of the if statement. So if you see here, it's a number is greater than 4, although it's not, because this condition is met. So that's why it implement executed the body of if statement. The next part is like, most of the time we don't just write the if statements alone. They have their or like else part also. And what it does is like when this condition doesn't met, we go to the else part and we do some other things. Like we will just copy this here, and you can say number is not greater than 4, and I will just quickly turn it to here. And now you can see like this condition is not met, like this condition is false, and it goes to the else part, just skipping the if statement. So this is the how you can write conditional statements, or you can use if else behavior in your in your Kotlin code, or in your applications when you write any kind of I want to implement any sort of logic based on any conditions. So this is basically what we have done here. This is the code. Variable is less than 4. I just say num is not greater than 4. So that's up to you. And this is they just provide the different example. Like you can play with change by changing the number and see how that function works. But this is basically though there are two options like in if true or false. So if will be like true, and then the else is a false. But if that condition doesn't match. And then there is another component of if else statement, which is else if. Like if you have multiple conditional checks, if you want to do multiple checks rather than just checking if number is greater than 4, right away go to the else part. This is basically the default, I can say. Like when the condition is not met, it will go to the else part if there is any else part attached to the if statement. But there is another option which is else if, and it also take the condition. And if you take here like num equals to 3, and we will just copy this, and we can say here. So now there are basically two checks. If the first check goes false, it will goes to the next check for this one else if part. And if this is true, it will stop your function will go to the body of this else if part. Otherwise, it will go to the else part, which is like a default behavior. So in this case, it will print as number is 3, which is true, and that is the else if part. And this is for if you have multiple conditions, or if you have alternative conditions or paths for that particular given flow. And if you write the same code in like if else, if multiple else ifs in your Android IDE, you will get that I show you earlier. Like you get the lint warnings. Like you can replace it with the when statement, which is more concise and Kotlin way to write multiple conditional statements in Kotlin. So this part is done. If else if, and you can read this about like what is control flow here. It's basically just explained all the things that we have just covered here, like creating a variable and then checking certain condition for that, and then adding another condition in the flow, and then the last is else part. So the next is the creating a lucky dice roll game. So if you already have the previous code lab, you might have this code, but I will quickly create this class here. Oh, I think I missed the curly brace. Okay, so it says every time you run the above program, the main dies. So I will grab this code for just for the time because we have less time. We created the dice object and then the calling the roll function and then just printing the value here. So let's see what I do. So your 6-sided dice rolled 6. Okay, check if the lucky number has been rolled. In main, add a val called lucky number and set it to 4. So in this case, they want us to declare one variable here called val, which is 4. And if you understand the previous step, so we will, rather than just directly print this thing here, like the number, we will check if the result of roll function is 4, which is roll result here. If it is equals to our lucky number, which is 4, we will print we will print like you rolled or just a lucky number. I guess if we get the 4, yeah, that we are really lucky here. Like we got it in very our first attempt, and this is like you win. So I just printed the lucky number. So if you're familiar, this is the if behavior. We just added the condition for that. And the next part they want us to add for also for the when you are not hit the lucky number. So which is else part. Let's make a little bit smaller here. We say no, better luck next time. This is basically when this condition doesn't met. So we get the 4, which is good. Oops. So we got it wrong, which is better luck next time. So this is how if else behaves. And you can also add else if you want any other conditions in this. I will skip the else if, but you can see actually the sample code here, which is says like every time they have multiple conditions. Now, if you get the roll result equals to 1, 2, 3, 4, you can print the actually the what value is that, and whatever you if you want to do any like a different things based on the result. Like if in case of 1, if you want to do something specific, for 2 something else, 3 you can add multiple conditions with the help of else if statement. The next one is the when statement. This is basically a switch in Kotlin, I can say, and it's also you can write it as expression, like you can return values from this. Also, like even also from the if, this is also expression in Kotlin. So here, if you see in if you see the structure of the previous code, which is if else if, you check every time the condition, like if roll is this, roll number is equal, the code is very long and it looks very tedious, right? So with the help of the when statement, you can write very concise code and add up conditions like for example here when, and this is basically you are checking the when you provide the parameter to the when statement, it you will perform check against that parameter. So here is which is roll result, and we check like if, like rather than writing all those lengthy conditions with the if else if, you can simply write if, because we know our row result is in type of integer, so you can write if it's a 1 do something, if it's a 2 do something, and then if you don't have any specific behavior for any other numbers, you can write the else part, which is same as a if else part, which is else is basically the default part. And also one cool thing is like in this case you can also join multiple conditions. Like if you have let's say same behavior for number 1 and 3, you can rather than again writing this kind of block for 3, you can simply join those together and then execute your program here. So let's add this condition in this case. So this is the syntax, and if your particular body has only one line of statement in their body for each condition, you can just omit the curly braces to write more concise code. So if we get the lucky number, we print you win, and the rest of the conditions we will do nothing. So it doesn't print anything because we didn't get the lucky number. So let me quickly add the statement so you can see actually. Oh, this time we got the lucky number. So this is how you can, this is really a nice way to write concise code rather than using the if else if. And if you have these kind of like a multiple else if with if in your Android IDE, you will get the lint warnings to replace it with the when statement, which is more concise to write your code. So you pass the parameter and then you point, like you add the conditions against that parameter, and to verify that if that condition against that parameter is met, your code will your when statement will execute that part of the given conditions, which is like 1 3 2 or maybe the else. So here, if you see that's what we have just did here. This is like looks more nice and clean way because we just write random stuff. So if it matches the lucky number, we will print this. If it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and all these conditions have only single line of code to execute, we can omit the curly braces. These are the, you can omit that and just write have the single line. But if you have multiple lines of code for each condition, you need to provide those curly braces for each. So yeah, this is the final solution code for the when statement, and if else we already did. And if you want, you can grab that code from here to play with it and write like your own code, or like play with it and see how this behaves if you added any other numbers, or anything if you want to, just to little bit getting more understanding of this, how this when behaves. Like in this case, if we add this, and we might get a warning like you need to add the else branch because we don't know roll result, it might be at 10 or 12, right? Whenever we change this is like roll result based on the num sides. So but our code or our compiler doesn't know about that, so it will complain you about to add the else for this when statement when you try to add this in your Android code base. So in this code lab, we basically covers the if else statement, and adding the alternative paths using the else if to the if statement, and booleans, which is like true or false. And whenever the if condition met, that means the value of the if statement is true, that the condition is true, and if it doesn't, it goes to else, which is basically a false. And same for the when statement, we added the, we see like how we can write more concise code rather than writing this lengthy code with just passing the parameter to when and adding multiple conditions as we required those. So you can learn more about this on the Kotlin documentation. And I guess that's pretty much for this code lab. And if you want to learn more, you can go through these links. And again, thanks for attending this. I hope this one was very quick. So
Oh, that was awesome. I think it was remarkable, and thank you because you did it really well. It was a quick walkthrough, and you explained it, dissected it. I couldn't have asked anything for more better. I loved it. Um, and so before I get on with the badge, I just wanted to go ahead and say we will be stopping here for our code labs. There are two more left. There are a few left, actually. I apologize. But go ahead and take it to your own. Challenge yourselves, because this is a culmination of all the skills that we've learned from this week and last week. So I highly do recommend it, and you will be getting your badge. And thank you, guys. Awesome. This will be the final badge for the pathway of Kotlin Basics, and it's just been a remarkable journey. So thank you to all our speakers, Nav and Sierra. You guys have done an amazing job, honestly, sensational. And speaking of which, we wanted to reward everyone here that has been walking through with you guys, and we wanted to do a app submission, as we've mentioned before, and that you guys could win Google Merch. So ideally, the deadline will be next Friday, April 8th. We want you guys to go ahead and submit those apps. And as Nav mentioned earlier before, go ahead and download those GitHub codes. Learn from it, tweak it, explore what you can do with it. Take your time. Just do what you want to do that makes it special for you, and make it your own unique app. And then go ahead and submit it. And honestly, I think that's probably the most pleasing part, is to seeing what you guys can make with all the given effort that these speakers have put into it, and to walk through with Kotlin Basics. So yeah, once again, the deadline is the end of day for April 8th. Submit that. And once you go and earn that badge, by the way, do let us know. Make a shout out on LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever. DSCFAU will give you guys a shout out. So we really do appreciate it. Now, is there any time for Q&A? Do we have, let's see. Yeah, I think we can take a few because we're running a little bit late. We can definitely take one or two. How does that sound? Sound good with you guys? Okay. Let's see. Are there any questions? Understandably, it was a lot of content, so we'll see how it goes. Next steps. That's a good one.
So we only did the first unit of this particular set of learnings, and so you can continue to move on and continue to grow your skill set. And that's definitely what I would recommend is if you like the first unit, like jump in and go through some of those other units and pathways and see where that takes you.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually a great question. For us, what we want to see is, I think the features that we've been teaching throughout these few weeks, in which case it's been really building all those buttons, adding text layout, and just seeing how it can be interactive, as well as how similar to how the dice was working, for example, something where it's more responsive to that. As long as you uphold those, you can do anything, really. But having at least what we've been teaching, that's pretty much the basics, and then making that to be more unique of your own twist. I think that's the important part. There isn't anything really specific. That's why we kind of left it to be vague. The idea is it's your unique design, the way how you lay it out. But as long as you embed it, that's the important part. That's what we'll be looking for. So please do keep an eye on that.
And if you have any trouble with your individual submission or run into something you're not sure how to fix, definitely feel free to reach out to Nav and I with your questions. Again, I think you already mentioned that, as you can find us on all kinds of social media platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, and
Yes.
we're both happy to help.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, I think that sums it up. Two questions is good enough for me. No, these questions are awesome. I appreciate it, and I appreciate our speakers, Nav and Sierra. Thank you guys so much. Really, it was great. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and bring it to a close. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. And yay, thank you. We all finished, so take it easy. Appreciate it. And if you guys have any other questions, let them know. You guys take care. All right, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.